And I'd like to thank you once again for getting this thing set up and coordinating everything. And I think the last one that we had with the toilet paper, the rolls and tubes, I think that one has been recorded for posterior. And that'll be available, like you said, a little bit later if it's not already been posted online. So
it is on our YouTube channel, so anyone can watch it.
Now we have a YouTube channel. So thank you very much. And I'd like to welcome all of you in the present audience and all of you individuals that may be tuning in to this later after it's been posted to our second get together in the wake of our PhotoAlliance Bay Area Currently exhibition. Today, this is, and I'm not joking, today, I mean, we get to avail ourselves of Chris Johnson, who, I mean, reading the resume, the little thing I've got in front of me here, is sort of like reading a chapter from some volume of photographic history. And for the viewers that really can't see this, because nobody can really see it, I like because on a typical resume, you have you're born, and then you have where you went to school, and then maybe some exhibitions. And on Chris's resume, under education, it says education, studied with Ansel Adams, Imogen Cunningham, and Wynn Bullock. That's it.
All there is in that life.
And then under selected exhibitions, he's got Corcoran, Museum of Art. Oh, and the Sundance Film Festival. Oh, and the Smithsonian Institution. So it's like, it was sort of a pleasure reading this thing because, I'd sort of scroll down, and every time like I'd scroll down a little bit more, it would be something like, I invented the question bridge. Well, okay, fine. Chris is being embarrassed. I'm embarrassing Chris, but I'm sorry. But I feel like I'm just happy. Everybody else is going to say, yes, we're very honored to have your presence here this afternoon. But I'm just happy that I know you, and I'm happy to somehow be able to be on like a first name basis with you. So I'm just happy to know that you're there. Chris was one of the judges, judges or jurors that we had for the Bay Area Currently exhibition. And those individuals were tasked at the time of their jurying, with not only having to select, the 35 people that we featured on the PhotoAlliance website, but they also were sort of tasked with selecting one single individual that they thought that they'd like to speak to in this series of little visual publications that we have. So from here, I'm going to step away. I'm going to turn off my microphone, and I'm going to let Chris do all the proper introductions. So thank you all for coming this afternoon, and all of you future people that we haven't met yet, but thank you all very much. My name is Lonnie Graham, and I'm turning off my mic.
Well, I will do the traditional thank yous, because I am really grateful to PhotoAlliance and Linda and Lonnie and Douglas and all the staff at the PhotoAlliance for making it possible for me to, well, first of all, to get the perspective on the work submitted in the show. I mean, working with Anne and Ben was just a delight. But on top of that, I get to talk to Laura Plageman. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I first met Laura, I guess it was 2008, when you were an MFA student at CCA, somewhere around there. Right.
2 years before that.
Yeah. And so, to see her work in the show gave me a chance not only to catch up with what she's been doing. I've seen a few things along the way, but I was so moved and impressed by your work. And then as a bonus, we get to have a conversation. So we'll just forget all these other folks are there. And, but I will say that, that Laura earned a BA at Wesleyan in Middletown, Connecticut. And she got her MFA from CCA, which is where I first met her, as I mentioned. She's best known for her studio practice of creatively reworking her photographs of landscapes and abstractions, exploring the power and emotion of the photograph, both as medium and message. And I'd like to talk more about that message, because you are communicating more than just images, I think, in your work, Laura. So her work has been exhibited in galleries and institutions across the United States and internationally, including recent exhibitions at the Lightfield Arts in New York and the Houston Center of Photography in Houston. She'll be included in the upcoming exhibition, The Art of Trees, at the Gund Gallery in Kenyon College in Ohio in January 2021, and she lives and works in Oakland, California. So, hi, Laura.
Hi.
So maybe just before we start looking at the images, you could tell us a little bit about your background. And I'm particularly interested in how you first came to know that you were an artist, and why photography.
Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me here to talk with you. I didn't grow up in an artist family, or, like as a child, I wasn't, my mom's a teacher and my dad's an attorney. And I didn't grow up kind of knowing about being an artist as a way of living. And so I think it was more as I was in high school and then later in college when I first took my first darkroom photography class that I fell in love with photography kind of instantly, and did everything I could to continue to have access to the darkroom. I applied for TA positions and worked in the lab so that I could have a set of keys, like precious keys where you could go and access the darkroom and anytime you wanted. So I think it was never easy for me to define myself as artist. Even to this day, there's a lot of, there's a lot of associations with photographer and artists that don't apply. But I think just following the practice, just continuing to work and continuing to follow my interests. I need to always be photographing. I need to always have my camera with me.
Somebody has their mic on. Could everyone turn their
Mute.
Right.
Okay. So I think it wasn't like a clear answer there, but I studied art history at Wesleyan and photography at the same time, and I was just very passionate about art. But to identify myself as artist, and I don't know, I guess when I made a more serious commitment to go to graduate school, it was like, this is where I want to put my focus and my energy. But I really think of art making as like more of a vocation. I mean, it's not, if you're not making a living doing it, which is hard to do, it's just, it has to be a passion, it has to be, especially photography and the costs associated with, it has to be a passion.
Yeah. So there wasn't an aha moment, for example, seeing the work of some other artists that inspired you toward photography?
No, I think, well, I'd always loved photography. I mean, definitely growing up in the Bay Area, I went to a lot of museum shows. I went to the MoMA and probably in high school and college more. And just, well, I remember seeing, actually, I loved seeing Raised by Wolves at MoMA back in the late 90s when I was in college. And it just kind of blew me away as far as what photography. Jim Goldberg's show, Raised by Wolves, that was at MoMA. It was like late 90s. It sort of blew me away as far as what photography could look like in a museum setting, because I was used to seeing, more formal, traditional presentations, smaller prints. And also at that time, I think I would go to New York a lot because I was in Connecticut at Wesleyan, and it was the kind of work that I was seeing, I was pretty fascinated by too, like the giant Gursky images, that were in in the museums there. And so I was definitely influenced by contemporary photography a lot.
So the other question, of course, is why nature? Because there are a lot of reasons why someone would be inspired to work with nature, but you've always done it in a very unique way. So why did you begin working as a nature photographer, or was that your beginning?
Well, it wasn't my first explorations. I think I was taking self-portraits and wandering around, but I did love the act of wandering and exploring and discovery. And I remember a long time ago in a class with you, I think at CCA, we talked about that, those different modes of photography, where are you a discovery photographer? Are you, do you create tableaus? And I feel like my practice is sort of a hybrid that way, of like really being connected to discovering images and wanting to be out in the world and engaging with images. And I grew up in the Bay Area. I definitely grew up going outdoors a lot, being in nature, from the beach to the mountains. I feel deeply connected to the landscape and to nature. It's sort of where I find my peace, or my like sense of space, and get away from all the distractions in my head. And so there's definitely some of that that's in there, and wanting to explore the world that way.
Well, I want to begin looking at your work, but I want to just, as a preamble, say that one of the things that that struck me from the very beginning, and of course I got exposed to your work when you applied for your MFA, it was really clear that you were not, let's put it this way, you seemed skeptical of sort of conventional ways of defining what a beautiful nature photograph was. You always include things that are normally considered sort of flaws or imperfections, things that are transitory. So, I mean, I don't think it's a reach to say that the Japanese notion of wabi-sabi, kind of applies to understanding the way that you include things that are inherently impermanent in your pictures, and they get woven into kind of a beauty that's really been your own. So I wonder why that is. I mean, we know that wabi-sabi is, philosophically connected to Taoism and those kinds of things, but I wonder what inspired you to take what really was a unique approach to nature, and maybe you can begin showing some of your work now.
Okay. Yeah, I do feel connected to that concept for sure. Let me share my screen. And start talking about that. Yeah, I do find beauty in this kind of, in the imperfect, and I do embrace that. I feel like I embrace it in my process a lot more too, with the idea of rephotographing things, or kind of making creative disturbances to my photographs after they've been shot.
You want to go ahead and click play so we can see it full screen?
Oh yeah, sorry, thank you. Okay, there. I'm a little new at this. So I would say that I shoot in a more formal, traditional way when I'm out in the landscape. And this is an older photograph from probably, like, I don't know, 15 years ago in Texas, when I was shooting a project that I was working on in grad school on genealogy, and I was researching ancestors that had land in Texas from the 1800s. So I was traveling through that area with my dad, and it was a project about family and also about time. But I was continually drawn to these landscapes where there's maybe a little disruption. So in this one, it's that fence with the barbed wire that runs through the river. And just, it caught my eye. I think it was on the side of a road. A lot of the places I photograph are either on the side of the road or they're accessible. I like accessible nature, places where I feel like other people have been or other eyes have seen these spaces. And I like that idea of the imperfect, because it just feels a little more human to me. I think, that idea that we are all make mistakes and are flawed, and it feels like introducing that adds more of a human element. And all of my pictures of landscape relate to human experience or human presence. whether it's in the picture as a, like a detail, or if it's just a story behind it, or there's something in there in that way. And I don't know, I think I grew up with a lot of antiques. My dad collected antiques and was really interested in anthropology and ephemera and old photographs. So I kind of grew up around that idea of looking at the past through the scraps that we leave behind, and just, it's always been pretty fascinating to me. So that might be one reason why.
Okay. Can you show some more?
Yeah. So this was another photo made in around the same time in Texas, where I was starting to play with more of the idea of landscape as metaphor for, you know, the thicket as like an impenetrable space, because I was not able to find much in the land that referenced the past. So the photos became more like part of that story. But at the same time, I was printing them a lot larger. I was in graduate school and I was using the giant inkjet printer, which was very new at the time for me to be switching from darkroom work to this. And so I was playing around with scale a lot, and I was surrounded by giant prints, and I was feeling like I needed to kind of shake things up a bit. And so I was taking the photographs, these giant, this was probably a 40-inch by 50-inch photograph, and sculpting the paper a little bit and seeing what it looked like as an object, and then rephotographing those prints to kind of create a transformation. And that's when I started playing around with the working method that I kind of am still building on today. Just that idea of transforming the landscape with more of my human hand, and also introducing another layer of meaning into the work.
Mm-hmm.
So in this example, I was kind of doing like analog Photoshop, you know, ripping out something from the background and putting it back together. And yeah. Were you going to say something?
Yeah. So it's, you know, it's really easy to see how the way that you're manipulating the image, you know, changes the way that it feels. I remember walking into your studio and seeing this crumpled up picture and thinking, oh, either she doesn't like this picture, or she's having a response to it that is more complex than I expected. And one of the things that that happens when I see your work, particularly from this era, is that because you're rephotographing, so that the image has a new surface, you know, that's pristine, but in the image there's a disturbed surface. And so when you began calling these responses, it made me realize that you've got very complex ideas about what a surface is, like what the proper appropriate surface is. And I just wonder whether or not that's something that you do consciously, or is it a formal gesture? Because it's very complex and it adds a lot of ambiguity and meaning to your work.
I definitely was interested in playing with the surface of the pictures and thinking of them as objects, finding another way of introducing light and shadow and texture and depth, and thinking of them like more topographical. And to my eye through the camera, they just felt more alive. You know, they felt wilder, or like that feeling of when I was in the space with this kudzu plant, that this is kudzu in the South, that it's like been called the green wave because it takes over the landscape. And so I was thinking about it more in terms of that, as far as it being an invasive species, and you know, that it was a human gesture that brought it there. But yeah, playing with surface with that series in particular, I definitely think I was interested in moving back and forth between 2D, 3D, 2D. It ends up being a flat photograph in the end, and it looks very sculptural. I do print them out as straight photographs, so they have flat surfaces. But I think that surface definitely, it runs through, that idea of being interested in surface does run through even the newer work that I'll be showing later. So, but yeah, I think you're muted, Chris.
More.
Yeah, sorry. I know I have to remember to keep hitting next. Sorry. Start talking. So this is a of that series. I started working on the coast, and I was working along the California coast, photographing more well-known sites. You know, this is like a well-known tourist spot in Big Sur, McWay Falls, and you know, it's a generic vista. You've seen this photograph so many times. So I think I was kind of challenging myself to make something different out of it, but also to create these little magical worlds within the photographs. You know, I just, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. But and this one is a bit of a departure because I started changing tools at the time. I had been using 4x5 view camera, and then I started doing more stitching, digital stitching, to create larger files to work with, so I could make bigger prints because I'm really interested in details, and I wanted all that resolution. So I started playing around with the failures of the stitching. As you can see, like the lines in the bottom of the water there are where the stitching software I was using fails to connect water because it's a dynamic subject, it's moving. So I started finding beauty in that, in those failures a little bit, but I kind of put that on the back burner, and I didn't, after I made this piece, which is sort of a layered collage, rephotographed, I didn't do a lot with that, but that idea was there, kind of. I think that's, I don't know, I guess I find things that are a little off kind of interesting.
So, I mean, the creasing of the image where there would ordinarily be clouds, I'm assuming that's intentional?
In this picture?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So this is a more recent body of work I did in the Hudson River Valley area, Hudson, New York. And I was thinking about the history of art in that region, and, you know, the sublime romantic painters. But the project was also about climate change. It was for a show that was in Hudson, and it was about trees and climate change and my responses to that. So I was thinking about using the paint and the paper as a way of introducing like mood and light in a more modern spin on what our kind of sublime light is these days, like more of a human hand. But yeah, I think I'm very much drawn to these textures and surfaces. I do get excited by like the qualities of paper when I'm working in the studio, making pictures of paper and the way light falls on paper. This one was a little bit more of a flat photo, but I was playing with spray paint and to create light, to create that glowing light of, you know, like the sublime light. And playing with the combination of what you're seeing in the environment and how it relates to the effect that I'm using. So, you know, obviously the like graffiti on the landscape. But I started at the same time also playing around with this idea of doing more blending. So in the computer and in trying out more digital tools. So working with the paint and the paper, and not making the crumples or effects to the actual image, but just working with paper to make those layers. So this is a view of Catterskill Falls, which is a famous waterfall in that region. It's a tourist site, so it's sort of a similar view that you would get if you went there to make a photo of it. You know, the waterfall is hidden in there. And that kind of led me into doing more and more experiments with different techniques and tools. And that was kind of what led into making the newer pictures that I've been making in the last year, which was, this is the same site, the Catterskill Falls site, a swimming hole there. And so these photos were made, all of those the last three photos were made around the same time, but they're very different. So, yeah,
So talk about the impulse to include figures and people.
Yeah, so that is different for me because usually it's just, you know, unpeopled landscapes with references to people. But I think it was more about everywhere I would go, there was a lot of people, and I wanted them to be part of that environment, to be able to, with this photograph, I wanted to try out that idea of showing multiple moments of time in the photograph and having it represent multiple moments in time, and people as being these, you know, objects moving through space and time, and just kind of that human presence on the landscape. I really liked the effect that that was having with people in the landscape. Although some of the ones I've made don't have people in them, but in this case, you know, people posing for selfies or kids on their cell phones, or just the crumbling landscape behind. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an element of fantasy, obviously, here as well.
Yeah. And
I mean,
I
I'm
think,
assuming your imagination is working after the fact when you're creating these in the studio.
right. So in the moment when I'm shooting, they're just kind of regular photographs. I mean, they're, you know, nicely composed. I'm trying to compose them, and but I was shooting multiple frames of this same kind of scene, and I think there's some voyeurism there. I'm interested in what people are doing in the space. I'm interested in places where people go to be with nature and to experience nature, and also just to, you know, present themselves and present nature. You know, the amount of times you see people posing for selfies at a lot of these spots, and it's just interesting to me.
Do you have any of the in-between places pictures in there?
You know, the only that first one that I showed you was, but I didn't put any of those in here.
We may poach your website because I'd love
But
to.
I was going to say my website has everything. Go to my website.
Yeah.
But the in-between places, yeah, there were a lot of the photographs I made in Texas, and yeah, definitely like quieter interiors and landscapes that talk about that have a lot more of the built environment, I guess. This is in Yosemite.
And the very newest work, the ones that you submitted to the show, the currently show.
Right.
Do you have that one?
Well, this was in there too, but yeah. So it's these are the earlier ones of those that I was doing that are more multiple moments in the same time. I mean, in the same space, but multiple moments in time, and kind of blending pictures of people in space. And there's details, so you can see that the edges are sort of jagged. That comes from the process of, you know, using the I'm using a blending tool in a way it's not intended. So
you weren't using pinking shears, in other words.
yeah. I did do some experiments with actually chopping up photographs with scissors, and it was making me crazy. So no, I'm appreciating the kind of digital choppiness of things right now. And so this is more of a complex one of those, where this is a detail. I'll show you the full one in a second, but this is a detail that just, I started using, I don't know, maybe like 20 different photographs in one image, and they weren't just from one place, they were from surrounding areas. So this is Coba ruins, Coba in Mexico. And it was taking central photographs of the pyramid Nohak Mul in Coba, which is an area that's mostly covered by jungle, and they've only unearthed maybe like 5% of the ruins of Coba, Mayan ruins. But being in Mexico and being in that whole area, there was so much there, so much of the built environment and so many people, and it just felt like making these felt like I don't know, a reflection of that time, and being in this time and place with kind of the distraction and chaos. So this is a much more complex one. And I guess I should talk about scale here too, because this photo is like 60 by 80 inches.
Right.
Because it needs to open up. I mean, you have to be able to, you know, to walk up to it and see the details and the little bits of built environment and people and rocks and things like that. So
someone is asking in the chat what camera you use for your newer work.
What's it called? Very technical. Fuji GFX 50S that I got a few years ago. So it's not there's later and greater models, but it's a medium format digital camera that I'm very happy with. it's great for this kind of work because it's kind of slow, and I still use a tripod a lot of the time, and it's great for landscape. It's not great if you're trying to capture moving children or things that are fast moving.
But it gives you so many pixels to work with if you're compositing. So
Yeah, and I'm not really I'm not stitching together things anymore. That was when I had a lower, or like not low res, but like a Canon. I had an SLR and I was stitching them together because I wanted them to be really big. So switching to medium format helped me to eliminate that step, which was just too much process. And I have small children and I don't have time to be adding extra steps. So that was a great move on my part. but it does give me all of the details, so I can still print them large, and I love detail. I love seeing the individual blades of grass and the flowers. And I followed this one because I just wanted to show the extremes that happen sometimes in my mind and process. Is just, this is like 2 images put together. So I have some that are very I guess quieter. And this one as well is in Tecate, and it's harder to see at first, but it's several landscapes, different perspectives put together. And so this one is maybe what you were thinking of when you're. This is the one that's on the Bay Area Currently website as the lead image, and this isn't. I'm calling it Tahoe, but really it's made up of many photographs from different places, and maybe 1 or 2 from Tahoe, the trees. But I think what was interesting to me is this picture sort of took me in another direction of working with more images from different places and thinking about different perspectives of flatness and depth, and again I think surface comes up in this one too, because the texture and paint, this is like graffiti from Lake Temescal, a place that I go down to take pictures a lot. And the graffiti texture on the ground, just looking out into the distance. And then there's other little bits mixed in there too.
someone is asking, can you say a bit about the color palette you employ? Do you do that intuitively or formally? How do you approach color?
I think I work more intuitively when it comes to color. I always have. I'm definitely attracted to this sort of softer palette. The series you mentioned, the In-Between series, it was all very like pastel and soft. In general, I love soft lighting and I love overcast days for going out to make photographs. But lately with this work, it doesn't matter as much to me. I'm just like, I don't have as much time with being a homeschool mom right now, and I take what I can get as far as the light, and I'll make the best out of the images that I get. But I'm not going out shooting that much. What?
I was going to ask whether or not do you work every day?
No. I mean, I try to do something every day. I don't go out shooting every day because I haven't been shooting much in the pandemic, but I definitely, will take the opportunity to go out shooting when it's safe and when I can be safe. But I try to at least work on 1 picture a day. Maybe I do work every day, but in fits and spurts, like.
I suspect you do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my kids are in school, but I'm also their home. They're at home, so there's a lot of interruptions. So I think actually this process has been good for me because sometimes I can work really quickly and just kind of throw things together and see what happens and then go from there. I get a lot of starting points that I need to follow up on.
Do you have more in your slide?
Yes, sorry. So this is more of a like still life, I suppose. There's a lot of elements in there that like buttons and logos and human hair, and it's a picture of a dead bird, but I'm attracted to finding these things that are more metaphors for the cycles of life. And this is made mostly in Joshua Tree. So I'm also thinking a lot these days, especially about climate change and how, how can I talk about these really important issues without being, I don't know, didactic or very depressing. But I do think about that these photographs speak a lot to the fragility and vulnerability of nature and importance of things kind of disappearing, but also about how we need to kind of stir things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like, so in this one that's a little newer, there's photographs that I made recently of the some of the burned neighborhoods in Santa Cruz Mountains. So the orange leaves in the trees are kind of that. So yeah, I'm kind of bringing in those things, but I'm not really putting them in the foreground of the image.
Mhm.
So this one has, yeah, similar with a lot of different textures and elements.
Yeah, much more painterly.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of going towards the color. I mean, this was more recent, so I think that I work that way a lot, where the work leads to more work, and it, you know, it's, I don't conceptualize everything ahead of time. Obvious, I guess that's kind of obvious, but
So someone's asking a question. Ann Rhodes is asking, when shooting, do you consider combinations of images you're collecting and how they will relate, or does the compositing process come later?
yes, both. I think definitely, definitely, I was shooting things in this picture, like the fire landscape, and thinking about ways of combining it with other images. But I also do leave a lot of room for chance, and sometimes I start with like the idea I have in my head, and then it's not as exciting as I thought it would be. So then I move back to, you know, well, what will happen if I do this, you know, or let's throw this picture in that's from, you know, 5 years ago. So a lot of them are older. I've been digging into my archives, you know, because of the lack of ability to be going out shooting as much right now. I've been looking back and finding pictures that, you know, I've made. I make a lot of pictures that I don't do much with, or I mean, you know, it's a backlog. So I'm finding new ways to combine them, and that's feeling good to me.
Mhm.
But I think as I continue with projects, this happened with the response series too. It was like at first I was using images I had, and then it's always in your mind, you know, when you're in the middle of a project, that like, oh, I'm gonna do this, or I can try this because now I know what works here, and it just kind of goes on from there.
Mhm.
And this one is newer too. It's a little bit more spare. I've been working more on going out shooting in the city, so kind of trying more urban spaces as the kind of foregrounded. So I included this picture too, which was a newer one I made that I like. That's pictures from, you know, Fisherman's Wharf and like just urban area in San Francisco. So I don't know. I'm going to try to go more in that direction a little bit and see what happens, but that's new. So
So
that's the last one I have there.
yeah, so in closing, I mean, do you see any arc in the way that your work has progressed? Is there a way? I mean, I mentioned the notion of surfaces, which really seems to become almost overwhelming and powerful in these images. But is there any other thematic or formal way that the earlier pictures sort of progress and develop into what you're working on now for
I
you?
mean, I think that just that idea that I always have to be kind of adding in my own voice to the straight photograph, definitely kind of reimagining the pictures. But I'm still always interested in taking pictures that have like human presence and that show how we relate to the world, and how we connect with nature or connect with our spaces. So maybe that's a thread. I don't know. I
Yeah,
think you've seen a lot of threads too, which is helpful.
yeah. And of course, this one, um, has a very clear political voice where you're including recognizable slogans.
Mhm.
Um,
they're all masks too, as a photograph of masks, you know,
Ah,
which, you know, and yeah, there's so many different conflicting voices in there that it kind of feels like well, it feels like a reflection of everything that's kind of going on in my head right now, just the kind of overwhelm and polarization and kind of just
yeah.
so much, right? So I think that the new work definitely reflects a lot of what's been going on in my head and just yeah, I'm still in it. So
Yeah.
this is all things I've been making in it. It definitely is hard to create and analyze at the same time. So I do feel like I'm still creating. So but I think I'm always trying to reflect back on what's around me, which is probably why I like, you know, going out and still making photographs, even though I like working on them in the studio too. I like having that dual process.
Yeah, you're lucky to do that.
Very
Well,
lucky.
this image definitely belongs to the now. And it brings it right up to date. Are there any other questions? I'm looking at
Should
the,
I stop sharing this?
yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions, so I think maybe we're done.
Well, I really appreciate talking to you. It's been really nice.
If
Yeah.
anyone wants to shout out a question, they could do
Yeah,
it
that's
now if
fine
you're
too.
uncomfortable with the chat.
I see it. What is it?
Oh,
I have a
Linda.
question. So once we get the vaccines and people can travel again, where are you going?
That's a great question. I'm really interested in ruins right now. Like the photo I made at Koba, just oh, I would love to go and take more photographs of ruins and explore more places. So that could be many places. But yeah, I also still am just happy to travel around California. You know, I miss Yosemite and yeah, the Southwest.
Mhm.
I just really love taking road trips and I haven't been feeling that desire, you know, and I'm just, our family's in a high risk bubble, so we're not taking many chances with traveling.
No, I'm glad you're being safe, but I think we're all getting stir crazy.
So stir crazy. Oh my God. Yeah. So it is good to plan ahead, right? To have some hope and some plans for
Do
travel.
you ever get out the view camera anymore? Or is it pretty much all digital now?
I haven't gotten it out in a while, but I will not let it go. And I think about it often. I think the biggest drawback for me is just the film processing and then needing to scan the film after and just like the expense of that. But I love the way view cameras capture space, and there's a difference there with that. So I miss the rise and the fall and all, and all that. Maybe I will.
So somebody's asking, do you mask your photos manually?
Not off. Sometimes. I mean, so okay. So the way the process has been working is that I've been using the blending tools so I'll select images that I want to use, and sometimes I'll mask them out myself, but sometimes I'll do this process where it blends it, but I'm inputting the wrong information so that it's doing it the wrong way. So blending tools are designed to obviously not have seams and jagged edges and to really, you know, stitch something together seamlessly. But I like seeing those edges. So I'm letting it do its thing, but then I'm exerting control over it in the end. Like I pick at it and mess with it a little bit because I can't help it.
So this kind of leads into a question of how much time is invested in an image like some of the ones that you've seen. I mean, it looks like it might take you months to put those images together.
Sometimes, and then sometimes it's a lot quicker, you know, but they're made up of photos that have taken me many hours to make. So I think that's the thing with having like a multi-step process, you know, it's hard to it's hard to like count how many hours are involved, but yeah, I guess I'm passionate about it.
Yeah, that really showed.
But sometimes things come more quickly than others, right? You know, it's just, yeah.
So Bob Awfuldish, an old friend, gave us a great quote. He says, fantastic and inspiring work. So
Oh, thank you.
thank you so much, Laura. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming and listening.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Don't forget next week we have, or yeah, our next installment will happen next week. Douglas, you have the exact times on that when Bing is going to interview
Yes.
his choice.
Just a second here.
Great to see some old friends. Barbara, Robert. I can't see everybody.
I have to thank everybody for coming, and all of those of you who decided to tune in today. That's really wonderful of you to take time out of your day, out of the kitchen, and
Yeah,
make it over to the computer.
Bin Dan will be interviewing Anna Roddy at 1:00 p.m. on Saturday, December 19th. So
Thank
I
you.
hope you'll all tune in for that as well.
All right, we'll hope to see you all again next week. Thank you all. Oh, and then there's the closing. We're going to do a closing for this exhibition, and that'll be later when it closes.
Yeah, please go see the exhibition.
Absolutely.
That's-
Oh, and the Instagram. Go, check the Instagram and the Facebook and look in on the website where, like Chris says, where you can see the exhibition and see the work in situ, see it in the wild.
And I'm posting all this stuff in the chat, which you can save by clicking on the 3 little dots in the lower corner.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. Thank you for that.
The constant font of information. Thank
I
you.
learn something new every day. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Laura.
Chris.
Bye, Chris.
Thanks,
Thanks
Laura.
again.
Thank you, Laura. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Like Ari.
Fingers
Thank
on
you.
it.
Thank you, Margaret.
Bye, Mom.
Mama.
Thank you, Mom.
Bye, girl.
Grossy.
Bye.
Bye, sweeties.